January 14th, 2023. Park Ranger Elias Thorne is conducting a routine survey of a remote drainage basin in the North Cascades, an area scorched by a wildfire 3 years prior, when his hiking pole strikes something that resonates with a hollow ring of plastic. This section of the wilderness, known as the Desolation Reach, had been closed to the public for a decade due to unstable terrain and the sheer verticality of its jagged ridges. Elias kneels in the gray ash and charred remnants of hemlock trees, reaching into a crevice where the snowmelt has recently receded. He pulls free a rugged action camera, its mounting bracket snapped, its casing scarred by heat and pitted by years of exposure to sub-zero winters. The lens is clouded with a fine layer of silt, but the housing remains sealed. On the side of the device, a name is etched into the rubberized grip with a steady hand: K. Miller. Elias Thorne had been a junior ranger in 2013. He remembers the name because Catherine Miller wasn't just another missing person report on a crowded desk. She was the one they never found, the one who had done everything right. Catherine Miller was 31 years old in August 2013, a structural engineer with a passion for solo alpine climbing and a resume that included summits of some of the most technical peaks in North America. She was the definition of an expert victim. Her gear was top tier. Her physical conditioning was elite. Most importantly, her planning was surgical. Before she set out on her 4-day trek through the Desolation Reach, she had filed a detailed itinerary with the ranger station, left a secondary copy with her brother, and carried a GPS beacon that she tested in the parking lot. She moved with the confidence of someone who understood the mathematics of risk. But on August 12, 2013, that confidence encountered something the mathematics couldn't account for. When she failed to check in on the evening of the 15th, the search operation was massive. For 14 days, helicopters mapped every square meter of the ridge. Technical teams rappelled into every chimney and crevice. There was no signal from her beacon, no smoke from a signal fire, no brightly colored fabric from her high-visibility tent. Catherine Miller had stepped into the North Cascades and simply ceased to be. The case was eventually filed under the heading of probable accidental death, body not recovered. Now, 10 years later, Elias Thorne holds the only piece of her that has ever returned from the mountains. He carries the camera back to the station in a protective bag, his mind replaying the headlines from a decade ago. At the Regional Forensics Lab in Seattle, digital evidence technician Marcus Vance begins the delicate process of data extraction. The camera's internal battery has long since swelled and failed, but the SD card is a miracle of engineering. It has survived the freeze-thaw cycles and the literal fire that swept through the valley. As the files begin to populate on his monitor, Vance feels the weight of the moment. These are not just files. They're the final thoughts of a woman who knew she was walking toward the end. There are 22 video clips in total, representing 6 hours and 14 minutes of footage. The first clip begins at 6:45 a.m. on August 12th. Catherine's face fills the frame, illuminated by the soft, blue light of dawn. She looks energized, checking the straps of her pack, confirming her compass heading. Day 1, she says to the camera. The goal is the Needle's Eye by sunset. Weather looks perfect. The footage shows a woman in total control of her environment. She narrating her route choices, explaining why she's avoiding certain scree slopes, demonstrating the proper way to secure a perimeter line on a steep traverse. It is an instructional video on how to survive, filmed by someone who is about to die. By the middle of the first day, the tone begins to shift. It isn't a sudden crisis, but a series of small, unsettling observations. In clip 7, Catherine is standing on a granite ledge looking down into the valley. She's silent for a long time. Then she whispers, almost to herself, that something is wrong with the shadows. She points the camera toward a stand of ancient cedars. The sun is at her back, high and bright, but the shadows in the trees are moving against the light. They are elongating while the sun is rising. She laughs it off as a trick of the atmospheric haze, but she doesn't turn the camera off for several minutes. She just watches the trees. By the evening of day 1, she has reached her camp at the Needle's Eye. The footage shows her setting up her tent with mechanical efficiency. But as she eats her meal, she keeps looking over her shoulder. The camera is propped on a rock, capturing the vast, silent expanse of the Cascades behind her. The mountains are beautiful, purple and jagged against the dying sun. But in the periphery of the frame, there is a flicker, a distortion. It looks like heat shimmer, but the temperature has dropped to 40 degrees. Catherine notices it. She picks up the camera and zooms in. The distortion isn't a heat wave. It's a localized ripple in the air, moving along the ridgeline at a speed no human could maintain on that terrain. It has no shape, no color. It is simply a displacement of the world. Catherine doesn't scream. She doesn't panic. She describes it. It's moving like fluid, she says, her voice steady but whispered. It isn't displacing the grass. It isn't making a sound. I'm at 7,000 feet, and I'm not alone. She sleeps with the camera running in her tent that night. The audio captures the sound of the wind, the occasional shift of the tent fabric, and then, at 3:14 a.m., a sound that Marcus Vance had to run through 3 different filters to identify. It sounds like a low-frequency hum, a vibration that makes the camera lens rattle in its housing. Inside the tent, Catherine is awake. You can see her eyes reflected in the infrared light of the camera. She isn't looking at the door. She's looking at the floor of the tent. Something is vibrating the earth beneath her, but the trees outside are perfectly still. The morning of day 2 begins with a decision that haunts the investigators who watch it 10 years later. Catherine Miller, an expert climber who knows that when things feel wrong you retreat, decides to go higher. Her journal, which she recites to the camera, suggests she believed she was witnessing a rare meteorological phenomenon. She wanted to document it. She wanted to be the one to bring the data back. This is the rule of irony in its purest form. The very curiosity and analytical mind that made her a great engineer were the tools that led her deeper into the trap. She spent the next 4 hours climbing the sheer face of the Desolation Spire. The footage is harrowing. She is free climbing sections that should require a partner and a rope. She's moving fast, her breathing heavy, her focus entirely on the summit. Every 20 minutes, she stops and points the camera back at the valley. The distortion is still there. It's closer now. It's no longer just a ripple. It's a void. A patch of the forest where the light refuses to land. It's following her path, step for step, climbing the rock as she climbs. By noon, she reaches the summit. The footage from this moment is spectacular and terrifying. She stands on a platform of rock no larger than a dining table, surrounded by a 3,000-foot drop on all sides. She turns the camera 360 degrees. The sky is a deep, bruised blue, but the valley below is gone. It sounds like a low-frequency hum, a vibration that makes the camera lens rattle in its housing. Inside the tent, Catherine is awake. You can see her eyes reflected in the infrared light of the camera. She isn't looking at the door. She's looking at the floor of the tent. Something is vibrating the earth beneath her, but the trees outside are perfectly still. The morning of day 2 begins with a decision that haunts the investigators who watch it 10 years later. Catherine Miller, an expert climber who knows that when things feel wrong you retreat, decides to go higher. Her journal, which she recites to the camera, suggests she believed she was witnessing a rare meteorological phenomenon. She wanted to document it. She wanted to be the one to bring the data back. This is the rule of irony in its purest form. The very curiosity and analytical mind that made her a great engineer were the tools that led her deeper into the trap. She spent the next 4 hours climbing the sheer face of the Desolation Spire. The footage is harrowing. She is free climbing sections that should require a partner and a rope. She's moving fast, her breathing heavy, her focus entirely on the summit. Every 20 minutes, she stops and points the camera back at the valley. The distortion is still there. It's closer now. It's no longer just a ripple. It's a void. A patch of the forest where the light refuses to land. It's following her path, step for step, climbing the rock as she climbs. By noon, she reaches the summit. The footage from this moment is spectacular and terrifying. She stands on a platform of rock no larger than a dining table, surrounded by a 3,000-foot drop on all sides. She turns the camera 360 degrees. The sky is a deep, bruised blue, but the valley below is gone. A thick, unnatural fog has filled the basin, a white wall of vapor that stops exactly at the base of her spire. It isn't moving with the wind, and they remember that the mountains don't care about your plans. They don't care about your gear. They only care about the secrets they keep. Catherine Miller is gone, but her voice remains, a digital ghost in a world of granite and ash. "Tell them I wasn't lost," she had said, and she wasn't. She was exactly where the mountains wanted her to be. The footage shows us the end, but it doesn't give us the truth. It only gives us the void. In the North Cascades, the void is a long, cold walk from home. The hikers who venture into the Reach now are fewer than they used to be. The stories have spread, as stories always do, becoming legends, then warnings. They talk about the woman in the red jacket who sits on the spire, waiting for the light to die. They talk about the hum that vibrates in your teeth before the fog rolls in. Most people dismiss it as campfire talk, the kind of ghost stories meant to keep children away from the ledges. But the Rangers don't laugh. They've seen the SD card. They've seen the metadata that shows a woman's body becoming light and shadow. They know that the most dangerous thing in the wilderness isn't the bears or the cliffs or the cold. It's the moments when the world forgets how to be solid. Catherine Miller's camera is a relic of a frontier we aren't supposed to cross. It is a bridge between the known and the unknowable. And as the sun sets over the Desolation Reach, casting long, impossible shadows through the charred trees, you can almost hear it. The low hum of the earth, the sound of the mountains breathing, the sound of a secret that has been kept for 10 years and will be kept for 10,000 more. The mountains don't explain. They don't apologize. They only endure. And somewhere in that endurance, Catherine Miller is still climbing, still recording, still fading into the white. The forensic report on the camera casing noted one final detail that was omitted from the public press release. Inside the battery compartment, protected from the silt and the ash, was a small slip of paper, a piece of a topographical map. It was the section showing the Desolation Spire. But Catherine hadn't used it for navigation. She had written a single word across the elevation lines in a shaking, desperate hand. Run. It is a piece of advice she couldn't follow herself. A warning from the past to the future. But the hikers still come, and the mountains still wait. Because the beauty of the high country is a mask for the horror of the heights. And we are always drawn to the things that can destroy us. Elias Thorne still has his hiking pole, the one that found the camera. He doesn't use it anymore. He keeps it in his garage, a reminder of the day he touched the edge of the world. He knows that he was lucky. He knows that the mountain let him find that camera because it wanted the story to be told, not because it was finished with Catherine Miller. It wanted us to know that it is there. It wanted us to feel the hum. And as Elias sits on his porch and looks toward the jagged horizon, he feels it. A slight vibration in the floorboards. A shift in the shadows. A cold wind coming down from the heights. He goes inside and locks the door. He doesn't look back at the peaks. He knows better than to watch the sunset when the mountains are hungry. He knows that the mountains keep what they take, and they take what they want. And in the end, we are all just footage waiting to be found. The story of Catherine Miller is a closed loop, a narrative of a woman who stepped out of time and left her eyes behind. We watch what she saw, we hear what she heard, but we can never go where she went. We are left on the outside, staring at a white screen, wondering what it feels like to become part of the fog. It is a haunting, lonely thought, a thought that lingers like the scent of wood smoke in the autumn air, a thought that tells us we are never as safe as we think we are. We are all just one wrong turn, one curious moment, one shadow away from the Desolation Reach. And the mountains are always there, silent and watching, waiting for the next camera to fall into the ash. They have all the time in the world. They have all the secrets in the world. And they are never, ever finished. The silence of the Cascades is not an absence of sound. It is a presence of something else, something heavy and ancient, something that Catherine Miller understood in her final 42 minutes. She didn't look afraid. She looked like someone who had finally seen the blueprint of the universe and realized it was written in a language she wasn't meant to speak. She looked like she was coming home. But home wasn't a house in Seattle. Home was the granite. Home was the air. Home was the void. And that is the most terrifying truth of all, that the wilderness doesn't want to kill us. It wants to absorb us. It wants to turn our red jackets into gray mist and our voices into white noise. It wants to reclaim the mathematics of our lives and turn them back into the chaos of the earth. Catherine Miller is the proof. The camera is the evidence. And the mountains are the judge. We are just the audience, watching the replay over and over until the battery dies and the light fades and we are left in the dark, alone with the hum. The hum that never stops. The hum that is the only thing left of a woman who did everything right. The hum that is the heartbeat of the mountains. Listen closely. Can you hear it? It's getting louder. It's right behind you. And the fog is starting to roll in. The transition from life to memory is often a slow decay, a blurring of edges until only the most prominent features remain. But for Catherine Miller, that transition was recorded in high definition, a literal dissolution of self captured at 60 frames per second. When the investigators in Seattle first watched the final minutes of the footage, they expected to see the lens cap fall or the camera to be knocked over in a struggle. They were prepared for the visceral reality of an accident. What they weren't prepared for was the serenity. Catherine's movements in those final moments were not those of a victim. They were the movements of a witness. She adjusted the camera one last time, ensuring the horizon was level, as if she were setting up a shot for a documentary she knew she would never edit. She smoothed her hair, checked her watch, and then turned her gaze toward the rising tide of white. It was an act of profound, terrifying acceptance. This is the narrative truth that the forensic evidence forces us to confront. Catherine Miller didn't get lost in the mountains. She found something in them that made the rest of the world irrelevant. The granular details of her gear, the titanium stove, the Gore-Tex shell, the carbon fiber poles, were found scattered across a 3-mile radius in the months following the 2023 discovery. They were weathered, broken, and stripped of their utility, mere trash in the eyes of the forest. But the camera remained pristine, a reliquary for her final experience. This is the irony that the grieving investigators must live with. The tools she used to survive were discarded, while the tool she used to document her end was preserved. It suggests a deliberate hierarchy of evidence, as if the mountain itself chose what to keep and what to return. Her brother, David Miller, refused to watch the footage for 6 months. He stayed in a small cabin on the edge of the park, staring at the peaks that had held his sister's secret for a decade. When he finally sat down in that sterile forensics lab and pressed play, he didn't cry. He watched the white fog swallow his sister, and then he asked the technician to play the audio from the 3:14 a.m. hum again. He listened to the vibration, the low, rhythmic pulsing of the earth, and he nodded. She used to talk about the resonance of structures, he told Marcus Vance. She said everything has a frequency where it just breaks. I think she found the frequency of the mountain. David Miller never returned to the North Cascades after that day. He moved to the desert, to a landscape that was flat and predictable, where the shadows behaved and the air was always clear. But he kept her red jacket, the one that had been found a mile from the camera, folded in a box. He said it still smelled like wood smoke and cold granite. The reconstruction of Catherine's final hours is a map of a journey into the impossible. We can trace her steps from the parking lot to the needle's eye, from the needle's eye to the summit of the spire. We can see the exact moment the GPS failed and the exact moment the shadows began to move. But we cannot bridge the gap between the woman who was and the fog she became. That gap is the void in the narrative structure, the space where logic fails and storytelling begins. It is the place where we must decide if we believe in the world we see or the world the camera recorded. The park rangers still find items in the Desolation Reach from time to time: a rusted carabiner, a frayed length of rope, a sun-bleached water bottle. Each find is logged, tagged, and stored in the evidence locker, a growing collection of fragments from lives that were interrupted. But none of them tell a story like the camera. None of them capture the transition. They are just the debris of tragedy. The camera is the tragedy itself. It is a haunting reminder that we are all just observers in a world that is far older and far stranger than we are. As we look at the final frame of Catherine's footage, that blank, white expanse of static, we aren't just looking at the end of a life. We are looking at the limits of human understanding. We're looking at the point where the mountains stop being a place and start being an entity. The rhetorical echoes of the Cascades continue to haunt the Pacific Northwest. They say the mountains don't explain why, and they don't. They only offer the evidence. They offer the camera, the journal, the buried car, the weathered photo. They offer the artifacts of our existence as if to ask us what they are worth in the face of the eternal. Catherine Miller's answer was to keep recording. Her answer was to ensure that even if she couldn't come home, her witness would. And so, we sit in the glow of our screens, watching a woman from 2013 fade into a fog from 2023, and we feel the chill of the Desolation Reach in our own bones. We feel the hum in our own teeth. We realize, with a somber, analytical clarity, that we are all walking toward our own version of the white fog. We just hope that when we get there, someone is brave enough to keep the camera running. The story ends here, but the mountains are still there. The spire is still there. The fog is still there. And somewhere in the archives of the Seattle Police Department, a small SD card holds the only truth we will ever have about what happens when an expert victim meets an expert mystery. It is a truth that is 8,000 words long and 1,000 years deep. It is a truth that says, run. But if you can't run, watch. If you can't watch, record. And if you can't record, remember. Because the mountains are keeping your secrets, and they never, ever forget. The finality of the evidence is what lingers. It is the way the camera lens captures the microscopic dust motes dancing in the infrared light of the tent, the way it registers the slight tremble in Catherine's hand as she adjusts the focus, the way it refuses to blink even when the world dissolves into static. This is the cold comfort of the forensic era, that we can see the catastrophe in high definition, even if we can't stop it. We can count the frames, analyze the waveforms, and map the GPS coordinates, but we are still just children staring at a magic trick we can't figure out. The grieving investigator, the Elias Thornes, and the Marcus Van Cess of the world, they carry the burden of this knowledge. They're the ones who have to look at the mundane objects of a person's life and reconcile them with the impossible nature of their death. They're the ones who see the A, Brooks scratched into the plastic, or the K, Miller etched into the rubber, and realize that these names were once people with favorite songs and complicated dreams and a fear of the dark. The forensic process humanizes the victim even as it documents their erasure. It is a sacred, somber task, a ritual of remembrance performed in the service of justice. But what justice can there be for a woman taken by the fog? What prosecution can be brought against a mountain? The only justice is the memory. The only justice is the fact that we are here, 10 years later, talking about Catherine Miller. The only justice is that her record was found, and her voice was heard, and her warning was delivered. It isn't much. It won't bring her back to the trailhead. It won't stop the next hiker from staying too long on the summit. But it is something. It is a light in the forest, a signal fire in the dark, a bridge over the void. And as the final batch of data is archived and the case file is closed, we are left with the silence of the North Cascades, a silence that is heavy with the weight of 10 years and 8,000 words, a silence that tells us the story is over, even if the mystery remains. The mountains have had their say, the camera has had its say, and now the rest is just the wind in the hemlocks and the snow on the ridges and the long, cold wait for the next discovery. Because in the wilderness, something is always being lost, and something is always being found. And the truth is always somewhere in between, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the light to fail. We close the book on Catherine Miller, but we keep the map. We keep the coordinates. And we keep the hum, especially the hum. It is the sound of the world ending, and it is the sound of the world beginning again. It is the sound of the Desolation Reach. And it is the only thing that never, ever goes away. Watch the sky. Listen to the earth. And if you see a white fog rising from the valley, don't wait for the sunset. Don't check your GPS. Just run, because the mountains are watching, and they've already seen enough. The end of the footage is not the end of the journey. It is only the point where we can no longer follow. Catherine Miller has crossed the line, and we are left on the trailhead, looking at an empty path. The story is ours now. The record is ours. The responsibility is ours. To tell the story of the woman who wasn't lost. To remember the name etched in the plastic. To honor the witness who stayed until the battery died. That is our forensic duty. That is our narrative truth. And that is the only way we survive the mountains. By telling the stories of the ones who didn't. By making sure the void isn't the last word. By keeping the camera running, even when the fog rolls in. This is the lesson of the North Cascades. This is the legacy of Catherine Miller. And this is the reason we never look away. Because somewhere in that white static, there is a heart still beating. Somewhere in that hum, there's a voice still speaking. And as long as we are listening, she is never truly gone. She is just above the clouds, waiting for us to catch up. And the mountains, for all their power and all their secrets, can never take that away. They can keep the body, but they can't keep the story. The story is free. The story is ours. And the story is just beginning. One final look at the screen. One final breath of cold air. One final pulse of the hum. And then silence. The perfect, absolute silence of the Desolation Reach. The silence of the truth. The silence of the end. And the silence of the mountains, keeping their secrets forever and ever. Amen. The forensic analysis of the camera's final frame reveals a singular, jarring anomaly that was never shared with the family. In the absolute center of the white static, for a duration of only 3 frames, less than 1/10 of a second, there is a shape. It isn't Catherine. It isn't a tree or a rock. It is a geometric pattern of light, a series of interlocking circles that pulse with a frequency that matches the audio hum. It is a signature, a mark of intent. It suggests that the void wasn't an accident of nature, but a deliberate construction, a doorway, or a trap. This detail sits in a classified file in a basement in Washington, D.C., a footnote in a history of things the public isn't ready to know. But Elias Thorne knows. He saw the raw data before the feds took the drive. He saw the pattern, and he knows that Catherine Miller didn't fade into the fog. She was translated into the light. She was moved from one mathematics to another. And the hum wasn't the sound of the mountain breaking. It was the sound of the mountain opening. This is the final layer of the forensic reveal, the truth that sits beneath the truth. That we are living on the surface of a world that has depths we cannot imagine, and that sometimes the depths reach up and pull someone down. Or up, or out. Catherine Miller was an engineer. She knew how to build bridges. Maybe, in the end, she became one. The mountains keep their secrets, but they also keep their bridges. And every once in a while, they let someone cross. The camera was the toll. The footage was the receipt. And the rest is just the long, white silence of the reach. Elias Thorne sits in his garage and touches the hiking pole. He feels the cold ring of the metal. He hears the faint, distant hum in his ears. And he smiles. Not because he understands, but because he knows that Catherine Miller was right. She wasn't lost. She was just the first one through the door. And the door is still there, waiting. On the desolation spire, the fog is starting to rise again. The sun is setting. The shadows are moving against the light. And the mountains are ready for the next witness. They are ready for you. Are you ready for them? Don't forget your camera. Don't forget your gear. And whatever you do, don't forget the hum. It's the only thing that will tell you when you're home. The story of the hiker who vanished in 2013 is not a tragedy of the past. It is a prophecy of the future. A future where the world is not as solid as we think. A future where the shadows have a mind of their own. A future where the mountains are more than just rock. They're the keepers of the gate. And they're always, always open. Watch the footage one more time. Look at the white screen. Can you see the circles? Can you hear the pulse? That's not static. That's a destination. And Catherine Miller is already there, waiting for the next frame to begin. The North Cascades are silent tonight, but the silence is a lie. The mountains are screaming in a frequency we can't hear. They're calling our names in a language we've forgotten. They are inviting us to the Desolation Reach, to the spire, to the fog, to the truth. And we will go. Because we have to. Because the mystery is stronger than the fear. And because the camera is always running. Somewhere, in the gray ash of a burnt hemlock forest, another piece of plastic is waiting to be found. Another name is etched in the rubber. Another story is waiting to be told. And the mountains are ready to tell it. One frame at a time. One arm at a time. One disappearance at a time. The cycle continues. The evidence grows. And the void gets a little bit smaller every day. Until the day it swallows everything. And then, finally, there will be no more secrets. There will only be the light. And the circles. And the hum. And the long, white home. Goodbye, Catherine. See you on the summit. The descent is always harder than the climb. But for those who stay on the Desolation Spire, there is no descent. There is only the expansion. The broadening of the self until it fills the basin. Until it becomes the ridge. Until it is the wind. This is what the footage ultimately teaches us. That the fear of disappearance is the fear of being forgotten, but the reality of disappearance is the reality of becoming infinite. Catherine Miller is not in a grave. She is in the atmosphere. She is in the snowmelt. She is in the very rocks that Elias Thorne walked over to find her camera. She has become the infrastructure of the wilderness. This is the forensic conclusion that no lab can provide, the narrative truth that requires a poet rather than a technician. The granular details of her life have been stripped away to reveal the elemental core of her existence. She is no longer a 31-year-old engineer. She is a 10-year-old mystery. She is a data point in the history of the impossible. And as the camera's battery finally dies in the evidence locker, the last image it held, the white fog, remains burned into the sensor. A permanent ghost of a moment that changed the world. This is why we can't look away. Because we are all engineers of our own lives, building structures that we hope will last, but we are all climbing toward a summit that we don't fully understand. We are all carrying our cameras, documenting our journeys, hoping that if we vanish, someone will find the card. Someone will watch the footage. Someone will say our names. This is the human condition, to be a witness to our own erasure. And Catherine Miller did it better than anyone. She turned her disappearance into a masterpiece of evidence. She made sure the mountains couldn't keep her secret. She made sure we had a look. And so we do. We look at the North Cascades. We look at the Desolation Reach. We look at the fog. And we see her. We see the red jacket. We see the steady eyes. We see the woman who wasn't lost. We see ourselves. And we hear the hum. The hum that tells us we are part of something bigger. Something older. Something that doesn't need to be explained because it just is. The mountains are silent. The camera is dark. The story is told. But the hum goes on forever.